Right.
Shrunk our schedule, shrunk our available time.
Yeah, I bet it did. That's a big project, and we're definitely going to get to that. So, anyway, for those who are watching, it's probably too late to get in the game at this point for Gen Con. But it sounds like if you want to hear some really crazy stuff, you can come in noon on Saturday and like at least see what's going on in that space and check it out. It sounds like a super event, and I'll definitely be checking it out in the future.
Mm-hmm. And that's after our friends with World Anvil are going to have their world building seminar at 9 a.m. on Saturday. So
that's right. So we can come right out of
conflict.
Yep.
Yeah. Plus, I got Saturday afternoon at some point has got to be my gaming hall journey. I'm going to take a camera and wander that hall and point out all the cool shit that people are coming out with, which these days seemingly endless. There's just new cool ideas, new cool books, products, all sorts of stuff. And so I think that's probably a good segue to let you talk just a little bit, Lou, about Grimmerspace, the concept of Grimmerspace and where it's at, and just what's going on with it.
Sure. And the only other thing I'll say is, if nothing else, come by for the 12 noon start and watch the crazy intro show,
right?
With Rone's custom written soundtrack and the comedy roasting, and that'll give you a sense of the spectacle for sure. So Grimmerspace.
We had a question there. Is it theater of the mind style or open, or how do the GMs run it? Just brief. Is it?
Yeah, sure. So we had to pick a default system. And so, believe it or not, going back, we picked 3.5 because everybody either went 4 and then 5, or they went to Paizo. So everyone who plays those two versions of D&D, the common ancestor is 3.5. So you have to show up willing to run that, but generally almost no one ever does. Instead, every GM offers their table. We pick table numbers out of a hat. I make sure the people at the table don't know the GM. Mm-hmm. Can't be running a game for your buddies who are going to score you.
Because Frank House.
Right. And then I say, okay, what have you got? What are you offering this table? And people offer any game at all. And if everyone at the table says okay, then you can go do that. Doesn't matter what game.
Oh, nice.
But if one player says, then you've either got to offer them something else or default to 3.5. So almost everything runs Pathfinder or 5e, but Frank House ran Blades in the Dark one year.
Right. Yeah.
People offer everything from Fudge to, Fate. You name it, you can offer it. Doesn't matter. Savage World.
Some 5e Call of Cthulhu would be right on time.
Yeah, I'd show up and offer Dogs in the Vineyard. That's what I'm.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's an awesome game.
So Grimmerspace.
Yeah, Grimmerspace, man.
So I am proud to say that Rone and I have created the most backed Starfinder Kickstarter ever.
More than Starfinder.
Highest number of backers.
Yeah.
So that made us go hee hee.
Yeah, for sure.
Not like that, Brian. No. So Grimmerspace is a science-only horror setting, our science-only horror galaxy invaded by magic for the very first time. It's bullets versus fireballs. Magic shows up in this science-only horror universe. In particular, there is a space-time tunnel connecting the default Starfinder role-playing game setting. They make me say it that way, or I lose my compatibility. The default Starfinder role-playing game setting connects to a science-only galaxy. And these evil mages called the Sunder Mages come through, and they look around and they go, there's no magic here. We're going to conquer this place. It's going to be easy. And the Grimmers of Grimmerspace, or the Grimmers of the Gliding Rim Galaxy, G-Rim, Grim, or how we get Grimmer, they're busy shooting alien facehugger horrors and other things, and they turn around and they go, just a minute, we'll get to you. You know, how about that? You're going to conquer us? How about this? How about I shoot you in the neck? How about that? And so that is the beating heart of the setting con. A science-only horror galaxy invaded by magic, which is just another horror as far as the original Grimmers are concerned. We created this. A co-created developer, Sean Astin, is on the project. Rone's in my brainchild. We've known Sean for a while, and we invited him on. And it's setting and adventures. So the main book, for example, has 14 setting locations. At one point, it only had 7 or 9, and it's been grown from a 128-page book to a 256-page setting and adventure book, half and half. Every setting gets a small adventure in the book.
So when you say setting, like how in depth are these settings? Because that's a lot.
Extremely, actually. There are 5 primary, what we call polities. Let me back up for a second. You made the mistake of asking an author about his stuff. So now,
would you like to hear about my character?
This great 18th level druid.
I've been playing him since grade school. When he kept falling asleep, and he'd wake up and he goes, "Shatter!" Yeah. So the gliding.
What was the question?
Yeah, what was the question? 2 callbacks. This is comedy gold.
Trained professionals.
Three callbacks. The gliding. Would you let me talk, man? The gliding room galaxy is picture a vortex or a tornado. The top of it is like a plate, and the center of that plate is called the crux, and that's where all the technological civilizations of Grimmer space reside. Their history is the history of pushing out from the center, still at the top of that plate, top of that tornado, pushing out toward the edge. And as you get out toward the edge, it gets weirder, darker, stranger, more difficult. The farther out toward the edge you get, the less long your colonies last, right? Everything below in that vortex is called the gyre, and things don't come back. When you go to the gyre, explorers tend not to come back, or if they do come back, they're only pretending to be the person you knew. It's really something else. And things come out of the gyre. In the history of Grimmer space, there have been alien excursions. There have been, most recently, an entire species has migrated en masse out of the gyre, being run out of there by who knows what. So in that setup, the 5 polities or star nations of the crux get the most in-depth treatment, Brian. That's the answer to your question. And then as you go out to the edge, each one of those places requires less detail because they are more mysterious and more.
Yeah, that graduated detail thing is really nice for GMs. You can either play that core that everything is kind of known about and you're playing amongst knowns, or you can play super mystical, fantastical.
Exactly. And
sweet.
And that ties to length of adventure. So our every location gets an adventure. So our polities, which are the most detailed, they have the longest adventures. And as you get farther out, generally, not entirely, those adventures will also be shorter. So we created a book that has 3 lengths of adventures. You've got 2 to 3 plus sessions, 1 to 2 sessions, something you can use to kick off your game. So when you sit down with the core setting and adventure book of Grimmer Space, you have a couple of tools for deciding what you want to play. You've got the length of the adventure, like I just said. You've got where in the setting it is, so how much weirdness and horror. We label every adventure by its intensity, and we've identified at this point our catalog is 15 different types of horror. So you pick up a Grimmer Space adventure and you look on the back or in the contents, and you'll see the list of 15 horror types, and then maybe body horror and cosmic horror are lit up, or slasher and
Oh, I see. So your thematic, you just blend all the thematic stuff in at the base level.
so that you can identify it before you play, so you know what you're getting into. Type of horror, intensity, length of session, and then where in the Grimmer Space world.
So we talked about this in our session 0 of this series. So this is a lot of session 0 stuff you're talking about right now. This is like prep for the GM, but also session 0 with your players.
Yeah, because when you're doing horror, especially, everyone has different tastes. Everyone has different limits.
Space clowns.
Yeah, and you want to know what you're getting into before you get into it.
Critters.
To some extent, at least. And we learned a lot in the process of doing this. Our first, you can still get it for free, actually. On Drive Through RPG now, there's an adventure called Abattoir 8. That is one of our first horror adventures. It's written by Richard Pett, which it's his first ever Starfinder adventure. And it is, splatter horror and survival horror. And we wanted to be really clear that splatter and survival, which are kind of like the redheaded stepchild of horror, for horror aficionados, these don't define Grimmer Space, right? It's not every horror adventure is not going to be, the Saw or whatever.
Right.
It just so happens that that's what Rich Pett gave us.
Right.
It's kind of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in space with, good luck getting out of here.
Yeah. So really just a tiny point of procedure. Did you give him those two things to work with, or did you apply that to what he returned to you?
That's what he returned to us.
Yeah.
So in reading and developing what he returned to us, we're like, we looked at our categorizing and we said, well, this isn't cosmic horror.
Right.
This isn't war horror. This is clearly Rich has given us splatter and survival. Those are the two loudest notes, most prevalent notes. So we identify it as such.
So, like, if you had to shout out 3 things right now that, if somebody was walking by you at the convention and you
don't do that,
would don't do that. Perfect. Moving on. Don't touch me.
Not there again.
What would you say 3 things you could say about this game that would be the quintessence of it, like that would hook people in?
3 things.
Or whatever.
Ooh, symptom.
Like what's
You stumped him.
typically at this point I say that's a good question. And sometimes I turn the dial down to like 33.
I'm just going to stare blankly into the camera.
Yeah. Because I think this idea
at
of
somebody.
overlaying the horror types is got to be one of them, right? I mean,
Yeah, if you're asking me the 3 unique selling propositions of Grimmer Space.
yeah, there you go.
Magic versus science, or more accurately, science fiction versus science fantasy.
Yep.
Star Trek meets Star Wars? No, I'm just kidding.
It could be, but if it's Star Trek,
Big argument on the.
if you're at Star Trek Academy in Grimmer Space, it's the worst day in the Academy ever.
The worst day ever.
The worst in its history. Like Tribbles showed up and they were also cannibal. Like fleshy,
Can tribbles.
Yeah, flesh-eating Tribbles,
Flesh-eating tribbles.
So it's
being buried in a pile of them isn't so pleasant.
right. So science fiction versus science fantasy. It's horror like Starfinder, like you haven't seen it before, grittier and right up to the edge. And it's play it your way, whether that be for horror or style of play in terms of the balance between science and magic. It's very, very plug
awesome.
and play and very customizable.
So then, go ahead.
I was just going to say one of the things that we played, I think the first couple adventures of the adventure path that they had for Starfinder. And one of the things that was really lacking for us was that it didn't have, Starfinder out of the box didn't have a real true identity.
Right.
out of the box. And so this sounds like you're really putting some grit and some great spin on it.
Thank you. Yeah,
and giving it identity. Yeah.
That was the idea, was to leave a lot of things on the table and introduce a lot of new things so that it did have that's one of the design missions, to have a specific identity that is different from the Starfinder default feels to me very Guardians of the Galaxy if I were to make a movie comparison.
Sure. Oh yeah. Hadn't thought about that, but sure.
I love that movie, right? But that's not always what I want to play in my space game,
For sure.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just about to start up a Star Trek Next Generation game. A buddy of mine locally runs, I don't know what version of it. I think it's the new Mophidius book.
The Modifius?
Modifius, there you go, the Modifius book. And so I'm super looking forward to that post-Gen Con.
Yeah, they're great. They're full disclosure, they're also our distribution partners. So
there you go.
Fantastic.
I love all their stuff. That's why they're our distribution partner.
Right.
Chris Birch, who runs that company, just is got his heart in the right place and does a fantastic job.
Yeah, he makes pretty books, that's for damn sure. So aside from all the other good stuff, so this sounds awesome. I just want to know, we'll for sure put something in the doobly-doo when we repost to YouTube
In the
over the next
what?
couple weeks.
Doodly-doo.
The
Yeah.
doobly-doo, the comment, the thing underneath the video, the text.
That is actually
Doobly-doo.
the doobly-doo. That's
Whoa,
good. Yeah.
whoa.
It's the doobly-doo. It's the doobly-doo. We'll definitely put something
Thank you,
in there
Jim.
about the Kickstarter. If you tell us about what the deal was with that, how do people get this game now? What's
Sure. So like I said, the Kickstarter ended. We had
Very successfully.
ended well?
2,841 backers and raised 180,000.
Amazing.
Booyah!
What was your initial? What was the initial bar you were trying to get?
10,000.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Go get it.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
No, the response from backers, the response from the community was just fantastic. It just so amazed, so enthused. I mean, we'd always planned for it being successful, because
Yeah. What else are you gonna do?
if you can't plan for being successful, why are you bothering?
Right.
And we had the suspicion that we were hitting a spot that would resonate. And it's just immensely gratifying, and we're very grateful to see that was the case, that a lot of people were looking for a way that they could play their space game exactly the way they wanted to, and that space horror is where it's at for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's
Yeah, I
right up
see.
my alley. I can't wait to
I
check
see
it
it.
out.
Dig it.
so
That's
we're in the stage now where we're putting together the surveys, and we're going to be sending those out. We're still waiting. We're waiting for Kickstarter. It just ended, so we're waiting for Kickstarter to finish their process, and then we're going to send out our surveys hopefully in the next 2 weeks, and then we're going to keep that open for not very long, for a couple of weeks at most. Let every backer who's in the project add their add-ons, and then we're going to open a pre-order store that will also be tied to grimmerspace.com. Right now that goes to a website where you can learn more about Grimmerspace, and you can sign up for our newsletter, and we'll email everyone who signs up like, hey, the store is open if you want to go check it out.
Yeah. Right on.
And so there'll be a pre-order store
Fantastic.
while we're working on it. Yeah.
Well, cool. Hey, obviously, I don't need to wish best of luck to you on that, because you've already achieved like 18 times better than your goal. So
Wish me luck on not having a heart attack.
yes,
Yeah,
I will gladly wish you that luck. So, hey, I think we're now going to kind of bounce into our topic of the show. Can you stick around with us, man?
Let's see. I can stick
Half
around
hour?
for a little bit.
Half hour, 40 minutes. That we're done at we're Central Standard 9 to 10:30. So that's when we're on for another maybe half hour.
I can stay on for like another 8 minutes, or
Yeah,
I can
perfect.
take it.
Yeah, sure. That's great.
Whatever
And
you can do, man.
welcome Baboonsky for the raid, by the way.
Yeah, thank you, Baboonsky. Appreciate it, bro.
So let me ask
Go
you
ahead.
this.
Go ahead, Brian.
If you've got 8 minutes,
Mhm.
if you could give one really solid piece of advice to aspiring game masters, because as we know, there are a ton of new people coming into this hobby every day.
Sure.
What would that be?
Don't try to control the story. Let your players guide you. Don't try to force a story down someone's throat.
Yeah, that's actually one of the line items on our discussion points for tonight.
It is, and
I think
that's a hard one lesson though, because I think we put this idea of storytellers in GM's heads as a formative idea, like you're this storyteller, and I've come around lately to thinking that that's not so much the case.
No, you're a story encourager. You're like the green thumb of story. You're trying to get it to grow naturally from the people at the table.
That's great.
So since we still do have a second or two, I'm curious about this then. It's probably been a while. It sounds like you've adopted that philosophy for a long time. But like, was there a particular point where you realized like you had fallen in love with that story and you were getting that pushback from the players? And like, how did you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with that? Even it probably still happens now. People fall in love with their stories all the time.
Yeah. Well, these days, my specialty and Rone's and my collaborative specialty is writing nonlinear adventures that are driven by the players. So like that's what we write naturally. So our rule sets are about how not to railroad, how not to shove a story down someone's throat. At the same time, it's always finite. It's within bounds. Right.
Sure.
We write or create an adventure. It's not like they can walk off and go anywhere sandbox style. There's still, there were 48 pages and it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But when I was a kid, sandbox is exactly what we did.
Yep, us too.
And that was the problem more than anything, was realizing, sitting down and going, okay, what do you want to do? And then the group of players is like,
Yep.
Go to the bar,
raid the castle.
Right. Yeah. So
again.
So I think when I first learned about inciting incidences from Nick Logue back in like 2004, 2005, something like that, was when I learned that if you want people to have a reason to go do something, you have to throw a moment into the mix that galvanizes it for all of their characters.
Right.
And so I think the second piece, if you want to have character-driven adventures, if that's what you want to do, then you need to be involved as a GM in helping people craft connected backstories.
Yeah, for real.
Right. If your adventuring party is going to have their most fun choosing from the couple of options that you subtly put in place with that in front of them in a sort of story organic way, that's awesome too. That's a perfectly fine way to play. Like I'll take option A and we're off, chasing the kobold psycho killer who's been slipping into nurseries at night, I show you where I go.
Yeah. That's pretty dark, man. Grimmer Space Speed.
Grimmer Space, ladies and gentlemen.
These little ones will not replace me. Yeah. Exactly. No, actually, that crosses a line that we won't do in Grimmer Space.
Yeah, one of the things I sometimes struggle too with is like a bias toward inaction. Sometimes people are just coming to like unwind and play, not necessarily be on it, with nitrous oxide.
Right. Yeah. So the best lesson I ever got in that was from a guy named John Stravopoulos. I don't know if you guys know him.
I don't know.
He was significantly involved in games on demand at Gen Con while I was running there. John's a great guy to know. Anyway, the lesson that I got from him was, during character creation, go around the table and say to somebody, hey, all right, you got to tell me, one thing that you love, one person, place, or thing you love, one person, place, or thing you hate, and then one person, place, or thing that you're, neutral toward. And people will come up with something, and you go, great, stop right there, go to the next person. They'll come up with something. Okay, just one thing. Then you go to the next person, one thing. Okay, now go around the table and tell me how you're connected to somebody else's thing here at the table.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And do that for things we love, and then do that for things we hate, and then do that for things that are just, formative in our lives, but we neither love nor hate.
Right.
By the end of that, you've got this web of connections of things that people, and if you're as a GM, if you're kind of mind mapping and then just drawing it all on a piece of paper while people talk, you'll eventually see, oh, so he was the babysitter for, his grandma when she was sick, and he took care of her cat. Everyone will just naturally come up with things, and you'll see things on your map that everybody's connected to, right? And it'll really become obvious very quickly. Oh, if I just kill off Grandma Lou, everyone's going to be upset.
Right.
That's my inciting incident.
Right.
Right.
We did a similar thing because of convention games. You don't have a lot of time to create backstory between people, so you have to write it out pretty in depth.
Ahead of time, yeah.
And we did a thing a couple of years ago that was secrets only a secret only and a secret somebody else knows about you.
Yes, that's also a
Same
great
type of thing. It wasn't quite as in depth as your map, but the game we were running didn't require quite so much interoperability. But I love to hear these stories about how people are trying to change the way the game experience unfolds, not only for the GM but for the players. A lot of innovation happening, I think.
If you I'm probably over my time, but I don't care anymore.
You're free, Lou.
We got to let him go.
That vodka popsicles finally hit.
Yeah, right. What are you talking about? So I'll leave you this with last thing though. The same fellow, John Stravopoulos, ran, I think, what I have in other times called the single best GM'd experience I've ever had as a player. Right, it was the single best game I've ever experienced, and it was introducing somebody else to role-playing games, and we were trying to tell this person, Alex, that it could be any genre, and he said, "Okay, butterfly effect. I want to play a time travel game." And of course, John Stavropoulos and I are sitting there with our demonology book for Dungeons and Dragons monster manual. I meant. Did I say demonology out loud? Jack Chick is going to chase me. And
I was right.
I'm like, John? And he goes, I'll be right back. And he goes off into a room and he writes a role-playing game. All the rules in an hour. And all the rules fit on one sheet of paper.
Genius.
Wow.
He's brilliant, right? So then he comes back and he says, okay, we're going to play... It's you two are best buddies, and then he played the girl we both secretly had crushes on. And we're walking down the street, and we find these glowing rings. So we don't know what they are. We pick them up, and we're still walking, and a bus comes out of nowhere and kills her. Right? So that's when we find out these are time travel rings. We can time travel. We get 3 minutes to go back in time and change one thing. So here was genius. We had made one of those mind maps that I told you about, showing all the different connections to people's, I love you. We both know your grandmother. We both had the same babysitter. I hated her. You loved her, whatever. He took the GM screen away and he put the mind map out on the table. So we could all see what was normally just a GM tool. And we went back in time and we said, okay, when the bus comes along, we pull her out of the way, save her life. So we do that. And then John would say, okay, but that means the bus got to nearly hit her and pulled over to the side. No, the bus got to where it was going, and because of that, it crashed into somebody else, right? And maybe that someone else was our mutual friend that was, walking to the bus.
It was all tied together.
Yeah, it was all tied together. I can't remember the exact details. But when that happened, he said, okay, now so-and-so is dead because you didn't stop the bus with her death. So then we looked at the mind map and we went, butterfly effect. What happens now? And it was like, oh my God, well, if that person's dead, then this relationship never happened. And then this changes and that person would never know so-and-so. And then you and I never would have met.
Who
And
are you?
time was changed. And now only 2 people were walking down the road when that bus hit. Right.
Wow.
And I was no longer their friend and then never met them. And of course I've got the ring and I go, I can't let that happen. Change time. No, and on it went. And it was just
the recursive loop. Well, that sounds like an awesome. I love ending on stories of people's excellent moments in games because I think that this is what people get into it for, right? They want to have this.
Yes.
They want to have those moments, even if the rest of what surrounds it's kind of not as great. You know, if you can just have that moment to talk about later. I think
that mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Better
Exactly.
than any movie, book, television, or anything because you're participating in it.
Well, Lou, I didn't know you until we met just here. You are a real gent. I super appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I've been spying on you through your camera for a long time.
Okay, and then you've seen what I'm wearing down on the lower. So we just want to really thank you for being here. The best of luck with Grimmer Space.
Thank you.
Continued success with Iron GM. We will be there noon on Saturday, and maybe we should take it off channel at some point and talk about hitting you guys maybe earlier, just to talk a little bit about it because I'd like to
Sure.
Maybe before.
I'd love to have Rone on board.
That'd be cool too. And so best of luck with Grimmer Space. Continued success with Iron GM. And thank you again, Lou Agresta, for being here tonight.
My pleasure.
We'll see you one of those evenings at Gen Con, sir.
Yes, sir.
My ice pop is gone.
That's right. We'll have to get you another one.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.